Our Big Ten championship game wound up being Ohio State versus Iowa. We go to the first quarter. Cade Stover with a touchdown catch. Ohio State's up 10-0, but then Iowa comes back, scores. They get on the board. It's 10-7. Buckeyes score with this touchdown pass. It's now 17-10. Iowa late in the second quarter, right before halftime, they get a touchdown and they tie things up. A field goal from Ohio State gives them the lead, but then here comes Iowa. They would score on a 3rd down and 4 and take the lead, 24-20. Now Ohio State with it. 3rd down, they get stopped, and Iowa has all the momentum going into the 4th quarter. But the Buckeyes, after giving up a field goal, would get it back. And it's intercepted. Iowa's defense would come up with a huge turnover. They run it all the way back inside the 15-yard line. And Ohio State in big trouble here. Iowa with it, 2nd down and long. Cade McNamara, plenty of time to throw, fires to the end zone. It's called touchdown Hawkeyes, and they're up by 14. Under 3 minutes to go. Ohio State will score. Mayan Williams scores on the ground, and now the Buckeyes need a stop. Iowa with it. McNamara going to be sacked, and Ohio State's going to have another chance here. 4th down and 2. They go to the ground, and the Iowa defense stands strong. They get a stop, and Iowa is going to win the Big Ten championship. So that's what happened in our simulations. We're going to go through and show you the standings. And there were a lot of surprises in the Big Ten, so we'll see if we get that many surprises in real life. But some craziness going on in the Big Ten for sure, and we'll break it all down. I'm going to show you the standings. I'll read off the results from every single team. And remember, these are not our predictions. This is simply what the video game said. This is just the results from the simulation, and I'm not saying that this is going to happen in real life. We will start in the Big Ten East, and already a surprise. You see Maryland going 5-7, 2-7 in the Big Ten, finishing last place in this division. Pretty much everyone has this team finishing 4th in the Big Ten East, but they did not have a good season. They had wins over Towson, Charlotte, Virginia, Illinois, and Nebraska. Those are the 5 wins. Then they lost to Michigan State, Indiana, Ohio State, Northwestern, Penn State, Michigan, and then on the road at Rutgers to close things out. So a very disappointing season for Maryland. Let's move on to Michigan State, 4-8, 2-7 in the Big Ten. They also had a very disappointing season. Wins over Central Michigan, Richmond, Maryland, and Rutgers. They lost to Washington, Iowa, Michigan. They lost their last 6 games. Michigan, Minnesota, Nebraska, Ohio State, Indiana, and Penn State. So lost their final 6 games of the season. And again, a big disappointment there, but not too far off from, I think, what most people would expect from Michigan State this year. Rutgers was 6-6. How about Rutgers getting to a bowl game, 3-6 in the Big Ten? Their wins were over Temple, Virginia Tech, Wagner, Wisconsin, Indiana, and Maryland. They lost to Northwestern, Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, Iowa, and Penn State. So a pretty good year for Rutgers. They did a little bit better than I've got them doing in real life. Ahead of them, how about Indiana going 7-5, 5-4 in the Big Ten? So this is your surprise team, I would say, for sure, or at least in this division. I do not see Indiana going 7-5, but there are some pieces there to where I think they could be a little better than you might expect, but not 7-5 good. They beat Indiana State, Akron, Maryland, Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan State, and Purdue. When you look at that slate of games, they didn't beat any really good teams, especially if you look at how Maryland and Wisconsin wound up in these simulations. They lost to Ohio State, Louisville, Michigan, Rutgers, and Penn State, but still a great year for Indiana if it does play out that way. Ahead of them, Penn State, 9-3 overall, 6-3 in the Big Ten. Went about how I think most people expected to go for Penn State, except for one game, and that was the Iowa game. They did lose to Iowa. They lost to Ohio State and Michigan, which I think a lot of people are predicting. That's what I predicted, but I don't think anyone's really expecting them to lose at home to Iowa. I think if they lose a 3rd game, it's probably like on the road at Maryland right before they play Michigan, or maybe on the road at Illinois. But I think they do go 10-2. So a little bit of a disappointment there for Penn State at 9-3. Michigan finished 11-1. 8-1 in the conference. Their only loss coming to Ohio State in the final game of the regular season. And the Buckeyes did finish number 1. They were actually 9-0 in the Big Ten, 11-1 overall because they lost to Notre Dame. And then you saw it, a big upset. They lost to Iowa in the Big Ten championship game. And that ultimately kept them out of the college football playoff. So let's go to the Big Ten West. And, you're going to see these standings and think, well, this is not going to happen. There's no way this happens. This team's not going to be this good or this bad. And like I say in the other videos, the teams may not be right in these simulations, but the season is going to go this way in terms of teams being surprise teams being a lot better than you thought they were going to be, and teams being major disappointments a lot worse than you thought they were going to be. And so maybe the teams are right, maybe they're wrong, but it is going to be a little bit more unpredictable, just like you're going to see in this video. It always is. It always is. So the season never goes just how you think it's going to go. And the Big Ten West has been very hard to predict. So who knows? Maybe this is on to something. But Purdue finished at the bottom, 3-9 overall, 0-9 in the conference. Their only wins came against Fresno State, Virginia Tech, and Syracuse. So they took care of business in the non-conference. 2 Power 5 wins there, but they could not beat anyone in the Big Ten. Ahead of Purdue, it was Wisconsin. Major disappointment. So we saw Maryland in the East, Wisconsin in the West. Those are the 2 teams that I just think, they're not going to be this bad. I actually think Wisconsin's going to win this division. But we'll find out when the games are actually played. Let's see if the simulation is accurate or not. I don't think it's going to be accurate on those 2 teams, but we shall see. So 5-7, 3-6 for Wisconsin. They did lose to Washington State in the non-conference. So their wins were against Buffalo, Georgia Southern, Purdue, Northwestern, and Minnesota. And the losses, again, came to Washington State, then Rutgers, Iowa, Illinois, Ohio State, Indiana, and Nebraska. Yeah, I don't see this team losing to Rutgers or Indiana. I think Wisconsin's at least a 7-5 team this year. Moving on to Illinois, 5-7, 3-6 for them as well. Another team that I think the Sim's underrated. I think Illinois is definitely going to be a bowl team, although they have a pretty tough schedule. They had wins against Toledo, FAU, Purdue, Nebraska, and Wisconsin. Losses to Kansas, Penn State, Maryland, Minnesota, Indiana, Iowa, and Northwestern. You look at those games and you think, they're probably going to beat Indiana. Good chance they beat probably going to beat Northwestern for sure. So you would think that they're going to win at least a couple more games. And that's really the story with Illinois and Wisconsin. Moving on to Minnesota, they were 7-5, 4-5 in the conference. This one a little bit more believable. They had wins over Eastern Michigan, they beat North Carolina on the road, beat Louisiana, and the Group of 5 games for the most part did not get simulated because we did not have rosters, but we just gave the Power 5 teams wins in those games. They also beat Iowa, Michigan State, Illinois, and Purdue. Lost to Nebraska, Northwestern, Michigan, Ohio State, and Wisconsin. But again, a believable result there with Minnesota. And let's move on now to number 3, Northwestern. So this is a big surprise. Not a disappointment, but a surprise in a good way. So Northwestern and Indiana, the 2 surprise teams. I don't think that's going to be accurate, and I don't think that Wisconsin and Maryland are going to be as bad as these simulations. But I'm telling you, someone is going to be a disappointment. Someone is going to be a surprise. Maybe it is Northwestern and Indiana, but obviously the simulation cannot go. There's no way to replicate what's going on off the field with Northwestern. So I just don't see this happening. But if Pat Fitzgerald was there and everything was normal, it wouldn't surprise me because we've seen Northwestern do that before. But yeah, they had them at 8-4, 5-4 in the conference. If we go through the games for Northwestern, they had wins over Rutgers, UTEP, Duke, Minnesota, Howard, Maryland, Purdue, and Illinois. Losses to Penn State, Nebraska, Iowa, and on the road at Wisconsin. Number 2, Nebraska. They finished 8-4, 6-3 overall. Pretty good year for the Cornhuskers. If we go through their games, they beat Minnesota, Northern Illinois, Louisiana Tech, Northwestern, Purdue, Michigan State, Wisconsin, and Iowa. Lost to Colorado on the road, Michigan, Illinois, and Maryland. So only 4 losses, only 3 losses in the Big Ten. Really good season here for Nebraska in Matt Rule's first year. And the number 1 was Iowa, 7-2, 9-3 overall. And again, they wound up winning the Big Ten championship, which was a bit of a surprise, especially over Ohio State. They beat Utah State, Western Michigan, Penn State, Michigan State, Purdue, Wisconsin, Northwestern, Rutgers, and Illinois. Their only losses were to Nebraska and Minnesota in the Big Ten, and then they also lost to Iowa State in the non-conference. So that wound up putting them at 9-3. And again, you saw it at the beginning of the video, Iowa beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. So some of this is kind of crazy, but I'm telling you, we're going to see some unexpected results by the time this season is over. and we'll just have to wait and see which teams those are. So your thoughts on this? Do you agree with any of it? Do you think any of this can actually happen? Or do you think it's just totally off the mark? Let me know your thoughts again down in the comments below.